Alix Sideris. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, friend.
Boy, this is going to be a fun one, I think. So I invited you to the show because, well, I mean, you've been quite central in my artistic life for the past few years. I want to tell everybody before we start how I met you, actually how I remember meeting you, because it was during a performance of Odyssey Theater many, many years ago. And I was in the bathroom. I was in one of the stalls, just finished, and then in walks one of the actors in full costume, kind of dancing alone in front of the mirror or just being overly silly, notices me and just kind of goes, "Oops, sorry." And I was like, no, go on. I was so thrilled because, you know, as somebody who was a little bit more introverted in my youth, to see somebody feel so free to dance in the bathroom, I was like, I kind of want to know this person right away. And I did. I got to know you, and I got to take some of your classes, and just it's been awesome. So for everybody who's listening, Alix, you are I'm just going to call you an artist. I'm going to let you give us the full hyphenated title of how you would describe yourself. So go ahead.
Sure. I'm a massively hyphenated human. I'm an actor. That's what I certainly was when I kind of out of the gate. And I moved into writing and directing, and I directed for some operas for young people, and I started teaching. These days I've also been doing movement direction and intimacy direction and coordination, which is a big, huge thing in my heart right now.
Right. And so would you say, because people like categorization, they like knowing that you fit into a different kind of category and stuff like that. Is there one thing that you do enjoy more in your life? Like, is acting the thing that you love doing more? Is directing the thing? Or do you really feel like you go with the flow?
Yeah, I think really I'm a person of service. And all of these categories for me kind of fall into that. I really feel that my raison d'etre on this planet is to uplift and to expand and to question status quo and to offer, alternative thought, alternative way, and to offer that through what I say or what I do or how I walk the planet. So really, I always feel like it's never really about what I've been doing. I feel like that stuff actualizes my purpose. Like I've got this purpose on this planet, and then what I do just kind of gives it form.
Yeah, I have a feeling that if you were to become a woodworker tomorrow, it would just bleed into that, right? It's part of how you live your life. And some artists are, they're craftspeople. They're people who really like to focus on one thing, and that becomes, what they do. Opera singers, perhaps, or whatever. But there are then the multifaceted, like you use, I like the term hyphenated, people who really do have an expansive interest in anything that allows them to voice their expression or move their body or whatever. So for you, it's more like that, right? That's how you approach art.
Yeah, and it's all about this ultimate investigation of what it is to be human, what it is to be alive, what is aliveness, and what is the interchange and the interweavings of that aliveness between myself and other, between myself and nature, between myself and this universe. So it is. I feel like it's this investigation of what this is all about. And so sometimes the investigation happens through art making processes, through narratives, or and then sometimes it's working through body. Sometimes it's working through breath. One of the things I love about work like intimacy direction is that, it's not just about a choreography of intimate story, but it's also, especially in this time of COVID, it's a time of really being in relationship to mental health and to, this curiosity of what is well-being and what is our relationship to it, and how do we work with our parasympathetic nervous system, and how do we work on on relaxing the weaving of our systemic nervous system, our fear and our guarding and our girding and our armor, with something that allows us to be more porous, allows us to be more vulnerable, that allows us to listen better and hear more broadly. And like, that's just something that I love working with, as well as the choreography and the storytelling and the safety of the performers. And that translates to life. And like you said, I remember once I was approached by someone at the Magnetic North Theatre Festival, when it was still around, to produce the industry series. And I was like, oh, I'm not a producer. don't like, that's not my forte. They said, oh, but you're no, a lot of my work is community invested. So that you work with the community a lot. At that time I was living in Ottawa, and their focus was going to be on Ottawa and Ottawa artists. They said, we really want you to kind of offer a platform for Ottawa artists to speak and to be in a forum where they can meet other creators and other producers and whatever. And I thought, oh my God, I'm going to be in hell. I accepted it. And then, of course, because I realized it wasn't really about me producing and being the best producer I could be, because that would not be the case. I was handheld by some of the great producers who kind of said, oh, let's hold your hand as you try to do this. But for me, it was like, how can I use this forum, this channel, the being that I am, the mind and the heart and the will and the skill sets, to help uplift the members of this community. So, how can I make this industry series sexy? Because it had to be hot in that way of intimate connection, of buzziness, of listening and offering and playing. And I was like, I know how to do that. So at least I know how to do that through being curious about that. So then I'll apply it to this forum that they want me to, I don't know, to do. So I think a lot of my life has kind of been that. I had this interviewer once for a newspaper a long while ago, back when we used to be interviewed in newspapers. Kind of asked me, when I was doing the industry series, what was it that I wanted to do, and how much did I make as an actor, and how much did I, all these questions that were so much about the commodifying of the stuff that we do. What's its value, what's its worth, why do you, not really why do you do it, is in terms of what's the raison d'etre behind it, but more what are you hoping to achieve from it? And it's never been my question. It's never been the achieving. The things happen, and then in anything, it's a draft, and you hope you can come back to it and keep building, or someone else uses that language and takes it further in the way they want to bring it, and it's like a global communication. But so it's never about landing something or branding my name to it and saying, oh great, that's the Sideris method.
Right.
It has nothing to do with that kind of.
Right.
It's a service.
But you mentioned a few things in that I want to touch on here. And one of them is, the arts during the pandemic, which is something we were kind of briefly talking about before we started recording. But before we get to that, though, I'm really curious about this investigation of life kind of part, where I think, to me, that's the ultimate role of artists, at least for me as an artist, has been my ultimate role in life, is to investigate life from a different lens, from an emotional kind of introspective, curiosity, playful lens, where the rest of the world is very obsessed with numbers and shapes and sizes and all this kind of accurate measurement of everything, where to me art has always been more abstract. And what I'm curious with you is, because you've been in the arts for your whole life pretty much, how has your approach to investigation changed, and how has it changed you? It's a loaded question.
It is. Well, I
Yeah.
mean, you know, like yeah, I'll say a bunch of things, and then I want to talk about
Yeah,
how
go
I
for it.
admire how you investigate. But like, I'll get into that after. But like, you know, I was born into a Greek household with a super creative family, but with a patriarch who had just come off, you know, the boat in the 50s, and you know, was living hand to mouth and was really trying to make his family kind of eat and live, and so, you know, though the fact that I loved to tell stories, and I was always like, you're brought into the circle of their friends, of their like Greek circle card playing friends. It was like, entertain us for this moment, sing the song, the celebration of my creative voice. I wasn't supposed to pursue it. Like I was like not supposed to pursue it. So it's interesting, Julie, because I also, when I was younger, I was a very good student. I was like amazing. I loved studying. I loved academics. I loved learning. I just love learning. And it was always just beyond memorizing, you know, like even with math, I was like, math has got to be something better than like memorizing of formulas. What's the applied math? Like what's behind, like what's the expanse of it? But you know, I was going to be a doctor. I wanted to be a doctor. I think I did all this stuff when I was in school plays, and I fell in love with, I love the body, and I wanted to go into research. I wanted to research the body. I mean, now it all makes sense, but and when I went to Cégep, I started in that kind of health sciences program, and I was shitty at it. I was just like, I mean, I did really well in anatomy and really well, but other things just kind of, it just didn't grab my interest. And I remember lying in bed, and feeling the pressure of my family being so proud of me that I was going to be pursuing something, you know, because they owned a dépanneur. They you know, at one point they had a children's clothing store later on. They were really, you know, kind of working class, really trying their best to make sure that their family was okay. And I wasn't going to throw it away and become an artist. And so when they thought I was going to be a doctor, they were so proud. And I remember lying in a ball, you know, yet again one morning when I woke up, and I'm like finding myself in this like curled up ball position with my sheets over my head, and this like deep, 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 deep funk. And I remember thinking, I can't live my life like this. I can't do it to please them. I love anatomy. I just don't get how I'm going to apply it, but I don't know what to do. So I ended up doing, I dropped it. I didn't tell my family. I dropped it. I was living on my own anyway, so, you know, it was easy to get away with them not knowing. And I did like a social sciences, and all my courses were like sociology of sex, biology of sex, you know, like it was all the sorts of forms of like the body and its capacity and its relational capacity. Eventually there's such a long story to it, and I won't get into it because it's just so long. But I mean, eventually I did a university degree in like a kind of arts and education, not education as in like how to be a teacher, but arts education. It's called drama and education. It's what we would call forum theater. It's how to apply theater politically, how to apply theater within communities. And I know, and it came to me accidentally. That's the long story. It has to do with, you know, having dated a shitty boyfriend that didn't hand in my theater application, on time. That's a whole other story. I fell into this. It was the only program that was available. I fell into this program, and I fell in love with the applications of art, the applications of theater. I was offered like free, not free, but like I was offered to teach courses while I was studying with children who were in drop-in centers and disenfranchised youth, essentially, and then this other spectrum of like humans with various emotional and or developmental or physiological disabilities. I loved it. And I thought, oh God, does this mean I'm going to be a teacher? And I thought, like, just don't even ask that question. like just be. And I had like people in university were like, Alix, you're an actor. So they put me in plays. So I would do these plays, but I'd also be teaching. And I just found my life as when I was in my 20s in this kind of interesting balance of like, but I really love teaching, but I don't want to ever give up my dream of being an actor. And it wasn't until like I was newly married, I had a little baby, got like very young. I just fell in love very young with this awesome human being. And I turned to my partner and I said, you know, in the back of my head, I have this thought that maybe I'm doing a lot of this teaching stuff because my parents never wanted me to be an actor. And I'm full of fear and I'm full of dread that if I do pursue it, I'll fail and I just like, I won't have in the back of my mind, oh, you know, I fell into teaching and I'm sure I could have made it as an actor had I tried. Like if I try and I fuck up, then I'm like, I'll have to live with that. This is back in, I used to talk like that, but I don't talk like that right now. That's not my vocabulary right now, but that was my vocabulary as a 20-year-old. There was succeeding and there was failing when I was 20. And there was depression, deep, deep depression, like deep depression, a lot of anger in me, right? So I turned to my partner and I was like, okay, I have to give this a try. I know we have a newborn. I got to do this. And he was so amazing. He was like, yeah, you got to do this. Okay, we'll live on my salary. And he too, he was like an actor teacher kind of person. He was like, we'll do this. And so within a year of making that decision, I got my first gig at the National Arts Center. And it was just like this, and it just kind of fell into I found myself in a show that someone came to see, and they took a workshop that someone said to the artistic director, hey, have you seen this person? And it just happened. And then when I got the gig, I thought, now I'm going to disappoint everybody because everyone's going to figure out I'm like big fake and fraud. And so I had a lot of that. Like my first few gigs were like, this happened too fast, even though it happened not fast. It happened in my early 30s is when I started doing this, pursuing theater more. Yeah, I don't know. Like it was me in relationship to my fear and having this kind of like, even when I was getting this affirmation that, no, you're in the right place, it was still filled with ego. Like, yeah, but am I good enough? Yeah, but it wasn't about service. In my 30s, it was about like proving that I had what it took. Or it was like, fuck you to my family. Or it was like, you know, a bunch of things that had to do with, not with the art, Julie. Not with the art. My teaching was about the art.
You said that you don't say success and failure now. How do you perceive those two notions now?
They're a construct. I just see drafts. I just see iteration now. You know?
Yeah. I was talking with someone recently who is a maker. You know, he makes things, really, really cool stuff. And we were talking about, using the word failure, like the concept of fail often, where, he said, I prefer iterate often.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's, you know what? I was like, you know what, dude, you're totally right. Like iterate, because I too use the word fail all the time. I embrace fail, but for me, fail doesn't mean what society means. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
and I think for some people, failure can be like liberating, right? Like,
yes.
like fuck up and get up. And it's like, get off the horse, climb back on. Like it could be also like, it could feel very, brave and very like, yeah, you can be in relationship to it, like not afraid of it, but in relationship to it and let it feed you or educate you and so, yeah, it's semantics. It's semantics.
Right. In the end, I think you're somebody who has embraced the notion of drafts, like you said. Like you're almost always a rough draft. I mean, even when you think you've got something, you're always going to learn something new, or you can drop something, or you can refine things, and change things up. So yeah, I want to retake what you just said about imposter syndrome, which is very, very interesting because initially I used to only ask artists about that. You know, if they experience imposter syndrome, it's such a common thing in the arts. But it turns out that I learned from some of my guests who are scientists that it's also the same issue in the scientific community. They experience imposter syndrome, especially when it comes to things like research and accreditation and just not feeling good enough for the system. So I'm curious to know what your experiences have been with imposter syndrome and if you still feel it today.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if it ever goes away. It's just maybe not as acute, but it depends. If I start something new, then it's back. you
That's
know?
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, yeah. And I think it comes to me when uh, sometimes it comes to me when I'm I become aware after the fact that I'm trying to be someone other than myself. Do you know what I mean? Like I'm trying to prove something to others, or I'm trying to emulate someone I think very highly of, or I'm trying to uh, fill in the boots of a concept or an idea or of a vocation. Like I'm trying to achieve or do, or you know what I mean? When I stop being curious, when I stop playing jazz with my life, then like I trust that I've got notes, and I trust that I've got an understanding of rhythm and tempo or story or path, and that I'm like really playing off of whatever I'm in relationship with. When I stop doing that, it starts building the imposter syndrome. And we're in a culture where it's about being a human doing, not a human being. It's all about what you're doing. It's all about what you're like proving. We're also in this capitalist world of like, everything that we say or do, people are like, it's a term that I respect those who use it, but like, I have a hard time with the word brand, like I don't want to brand myself, like I'm human, and I'm like, unless I brand the fact that I am perpetually evolving.
No, I totally get it. I described the way I do because I used to plan for the future. I don't anymore. Now I described it as throwing darts on a board because there's an openness there to,
Yeah.
I don't know where it's going to land. I'm going to do something because I find pleasure in it, because it's
Yes.
interesting, because I find it, there's something that's like, do you find that you're grabbed by things sometimes and you just kind of go like, woof, there?
Totally. Like there are, my whole life has been that. Like you asked earlier, about trajectory and like, did you expect? Like I've always like been either thrust into a situation or have like suddenly gone that. Like teaching was that for me. Someone said, "Hey, you like in school, here's some classes. Why don't you teach them?" I'm like, I'm still a student. I don't know how to teach. I've never worked with like ah. There you do. There you go. Like someone pointing to someone saying, you should hire this person. Suddenly I'm being hired and being thrust in this environment. Or, hey, you're a body person. We're doing an opera and we need someone to work with our opera singers and help them with embodiment. Okay, fantastic. And then suddenly that's all I'm doing for like a year or two. Or like, oh, intimacy direction was the same thing too. Like, and that's the thing I guess I'm talking about most right now because it's the newest thing for me right now. Was someone approaching me 4 years ago saying, "Hey, we hear like from people that you're a movement director and that you're very body centered. A lot of your work, and you know me, I'm such a sexually connected, sensuously, positive person, body positive kind of person." And they're like, we're starting this movement on intimacy direction. Do you want to join us? Like, do you want to? And I was like, why do I want to join an institution about intimacy direction? What do you mean? Like, what do you mean? Like, you want to have to certify for like the things I've been doing for like 20 years? What are you talking about? And but so I was like, oh, just tell me more about it. And suddenly I'm doing it and loving it. So yeah, I feel like life has been, and I think for some people who need to know what they're going to do tomorrow, I'm sure it's very scary, the stuff that you and I are talking about, right? Like throw darts, what? Like, but we're not also just throwing them randomly. We have an idea of what the board of pleasure and joy and fruitfulness, like what makes us feel fulfilled and of service and of, like there is a dart board, like
Yeah.
there's a parameter. I feel like there's not just like, uh, but it's there's boundary of like who I think what we're also I think on this planet to do, like what's our I don't know what the parameters of who we are. But we're discovering whether we're in the center or on the outside circles. Like there's some of those things that we know ahead of time, and some of those things that just make it to our board, and we're like, oh, I guess that was always a part of me because it makes me feel fulfilled. It makes me feel purposeful. I feel aligned. I feel healthy. I feel connected, mind, body, soul, spirit, all that stuff feels like grounded. People are served by it. People are like expanded by it. People are uplifted by me being involved in this thing. It's like, and I like suddenly, I've always been a spiritual person. I used to be scared of telling people that, though, probably because of its religious connotations. I'm not religious. So I always thought it was going to be like connected to religion. And I have no issues with people who are religious at all, but I have personal thoughts about religion and politics and stuff like that. But I was always very spiritual, and I was kind of closeted because I didn't want to tell people. They'd think, oh, she's woo woo, or she's like another artsy who's into the gems, or I don't know. Like suddenly I thought it would remove the cred of my work, because suddenly I had all this other stuff. And then the pandemic happened, and all I could hear and feel as someone who's empathic was like the weight of what people were carrying and the fear. And I had some tools. I had also gone through a health crisis the year before, and I had already had tools how to align my sense of well-being while in a place of crisis. Like I had language, and I thought, oh shit, Alix, just offer it. Just offer it. And if people think you're fucking woo-woo, or people think you're like, if it removes your cred, then those forums are not like that root is.
Can we talk about this for just 1 second here? Because I find, as soon as I turned 40, I stopped caring so much.
Liberation.
Oh my God, about how and what people thought of me, of my thoughts, of, I'm not religious, I'm not even spiritual. I don't have, if I had a definition, I would probably use stoic, only because I always think things are going to work out, whatever.
You're
But
resilient too. I find you resilient.
Oh, well, that's I think that actually, have you started reading about epigenetics? Because I
Yeah.
really think that's a genetic thing that's been passed through by generations of
Huh.
resiliency. Like
Yeah.
these like French farmers who left and trudged through the north and did things in the north that weren't done before. And
Yeah.
I think that's a part of me feels like the resiliency it's like inbred.
Ancestral. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's ancestral.
Absolutely.
But really, I think aging as women, as like when we hit 40, when we, some people, it might hit them at 50. But I think a certain side of us just kind of lets go of this pressure to be a certain way, to think a certain way, and in your case,
Yes.
to hide the fact that you're spiritual.
Yeah. And of course, as soon as I, came out, it was embraced. Like I had so many people just come into my remote meditations, and it didn't like, and they just wanted to sit in presence. They wanted to be in community. They wanted to breathe together.
Mm-hmm.
They wanted to be reminded that they weren't alone, that there was something globally that was happening, but also something like that you can connect in heart, that you can see one another and go, oh, hi, that people recognize each other. The gorgeous thing about the pandemic, right, was that people from France, I had people from like the States, I had people from like all different places just kind of connect. And so there were people from everywhere, and we would just sit and breathe together.
Yeah, that's
Like
a that's an
it
active
just felt right, and then it felt silly.
yeah. And that
Yeah.
leads us really into the discussion of how artists I think the mainstream media and just mainstream conversation about COVID has really left out the artists. I really think we've talked a lot about healthcare workers. We've talked a lot about frontline workers. We haven't talked enough about the people who are at the center of our appreciation of life in general.
Mm.
The center of our social and political discussions, the artists. And it has really been extremely difficult for the artistic communities, especially for artists who are accustomed to performing in front of crowds, artists who, but not just the performance aspect, but also what people don't realize is that artists get a lot of their ideas from living. And that
Mhm.
means living among people, living among nature, living among chaos. And I think chaos breeds great art. That's why Berlin is such a hot spot. It's kind of like a
Yeah,
very
yeah,
laissez-faire. Paris in
yeah.
like the 20s was very, kind of like, yeah, bring your rebels. So I'd like
Mm.
to know what you think, because I've interviewed a few artists on the show who said that the pandemic has transformed the arts potentially forever.
Yeah, it can't be the same. And because we're responsive, like that, being an artist is to respond to your given circumstance, to respond to the time, right? I mean, and to respond to this time is to recognize that we're different, that we've changed, our stories have changed, our communities have changed, and viscerally, we've changed. You know, um, I was recently doing a workshop with some artists, and uh, like in their bodies, this kind of um, their breath had changed. Their breath had changed, and that might shift into a different kind of breath eventually as we start to relax, as we start to whatever. But the opportunity is to then create art from that breath instead of resisting it or being frustrated with it or wishing it otherwise. It's like, this is the breath. So how does this breath create? And there's some really interesting things that have happened. Of course, we're talking about breath, and that's been the issue of the pandemic, right? Um, like, oh, there's so much to say about this. Like, there's the kind of experimentation that has started to happen now. Like, I was involved in a Zoom experiment. I was supposed to go to La Mama and do this show in New York, and obviously that got canceled. But instead, what we ended up doing was this kind of hybrid thing where we did this experiment, and some actors were from Toronto, and some actors were in LA, and some actors were in New York, and some actors were just kind of piecemealed all together, and we kind of created this experiment and the show was about fear and about uh, living with how you persevere, and how do you breathe when there's nothing but anxiety and nothing but restriction, it just so happened that that's the show we were working on, but we had something to really call, we could draw up all that.
For sure.
Yeah. But hybrid productions are starting to happen right now. And I think just technically, I suspect now that, there's going to be a lot more multimedia productions, because people suddenly have learned how to utilize creative forums that they never thought of before. I know people who are teaching, and suddenly they have to do a show with their students, and they're theater artists, but suddenly they have to learn all sorts of technical forums so that they could now it's in their toolbox, so they're in their wheelhouse, so now they're going to incorporate all that. I also some of the teaching that I do now. I don't want to lose my international peeps. So I'm going to be hybriding. I'm going to teach here live, and I'm going to teach here. you're always going to have the opportunity to pipe in remotely. You know, so you can get the live experience, but you can also get the experience if you're living somewhere else and you want to follow the work that I do, you can do it this way. I think there's going to be a lot of hybrid kind of stuff that's going to happen. And I think there's a will to embrace all that. Yeah.
That's good. Back in the day, I remember I suffered through a period of disability, and I couldn't go to a lot of shows and stuff like that. And I remember saying, "Can you guys please like do something where you record it? I'll pay the full ticket, blah blah blah." But it wasn't embraced yet. I think there was still a sort of perception of purity, perhaps,
That's right.
in the theater world that I think is now changing and was forced to change.
Yeah.
But I will still maintain that it's never going to be the same as going.
It's a different experience. Yeah.
It's just different. Like you said, it is different. It's, it's an interesting change. I think it opens up for accessibility reasons. I think it opens up the world.
Yeah. Yeah. It really does. And I think there's a real opportunity to be a far more global artistic community that way. Like, wouldn't it be cool to have far more opportunities to co-create with companies in Berlin, let's say, right? Like just to have and just like even teaching experiences, like the whole thing. Like, you know, I did intimacy direction remotely too, for, you know, during when things were suddenly cut off, that there's still ways of keeping each other safe this way. We're finding ways to I don't know. I think there's so much more that we can do with this. I look forward to like listening to all your artists and how they're like wanting to use this where they've wanted to like.
I think what's interesting is what I'm hearing is there's a community of artists that are like you, embracing the change and accepting the new challenges, and then there's the unfortunate side of where some of the artists have just given up the arts completely. I heard from one music artist, who said that, you know, about half of his colleagues just left the business completely. Like,
yeah,
those
you
music,
know what?
you know,
I wonder, Julie, as someone who's like, it could happen that they're gone, right? But maybe their dartboard got bigger.
That's what I'm thinking too.
You know what I mean? Yeah, and because it's not about what we do. It's about, I mean, maybe it is for some people. This is me totally like, you know, with my belief system and like, but I really feel that what we do is it actualizes what we're here for. And if, you know, I'm here to learn and to be of service, you know, and to help uplift and to expand, like all those things I said earlier on. So, you know, if I, like when I was doing the production work, my God, I don't think I'd ever, like, I'm really not meant for that work. I did good work. I think they were like really happy. And I've heard people say that was one of their favorite, you know, industry series. And it was like, that's all nice, pat, pat, pat. I don't want to do it again. Like, it was just like, oh my God, nerve-wracking. But what did it teach me? It taught me how to pitch my own shows, how to create community, how to be more broad-minded about my art, and not only think regionally, but to think nationally, and to think internationally, and how to create and that now is servicing me on all sorts of other levels as I'm involved in other boards that are doing national work. And so, you know, had I not done that, I wouldn't know how to do this now. And I think about so many actors who have like left and are doing right now, they're doing their masters, and they're doing their masters in psych or other kind of things. Who's to say 5 years down the line, they don't come back in a different shape or form. And like, I was talking about this with a very special someone recently, like, you know, they're an actor and also they're a beautiful director, and they've been teaching a lot recently. And I know the people that they've taught, this person knows how to teach. Like, they're so exciting. They're total jazz players. And it's still a creative trajectory. And it's an iteration. And if that's something that they're like happy doing, society has this very strange understanding of art or you know, vocation. And it's like, if you don't succeed in it, then you know, it wasn't for you, or you failed at it, or instead of just like, and just having this experience now. I mean, you've been through a health crisis, right? I went through mine a couple of years ago. When a big health crisis comes to you, when you're in a place of being in direct relationship to your well-being, to your breath, and the next moment, what really matters is what brings you joy, what makes you feel fulfilled, what makes you feel curious. Like, the rest is jazz. Like, the rest is like play. The rest is, yeah.
What I like to tell people is, because I have always considered myself an artist as like the umbrella of everything I do. And what I tell people who leave the arts, and a lot of them, like I said, left it during COVID because they couldn't perform. So like you said, they went and did their masters or did something else, is there's no harm in having an artist in accounting, an artist in medicine, an artist in teaching, because, and I say this as somebody who myself am in the corporate world in technology, where, I think differently than everybody else because of the way I think. And you need all those personalities together. And you do, I think we need more artists in the kind of more vanilla world, if you want to consider it that way. You need them
it's transferable
in science.
skills. It's transferable.
You offer a new perspective. If you got tired of writing music, go, write a history book, or, go do your PhD, or go work in a lab. You will bring something from there, and you will learn something from that experience. You will always be an artist.
Yeah.
Period.
That's just, you're born with it. It's just how you relate to the world. This is how you relate to the world. So yeah, it's not about the things that you do. I think we get into trouble when it becomes about the things we do or the legacy we want to leave behind. That's all ego and patriarchal kind of stuff. Like it's just about being alive.
What do you think about the youth, young artists today who have
yum.
Right, exactly. Who have a whole new set of challenges than we ever faced. They have more, in certain cases, more opportunities, which is beautiful. We have new programs. We have new spaces for young artists. We have a different way of teaching young artists. We don't repress certain forms of art and expression like we used to. I mean, I grew up, I was telling my girlfriend, now fiance, the other day that, right, I was telling her how in elementary school, the boys and the girls were not allowed to even share the same playground. This is how it was back then. So the youth today have a whole new set of challenges, yes, but also a whole new set of opportunities that are like so delicious. I wanted to know, from your perspective, like, what would you tell a young artist today? How would you coach them?
Well, I find that they're doing a lot of coaching for me. Like, I feel like I'm like learning so much from them. I was bringing this up just recently. I was doing a podcast of a show with Odyssey, actually, where we first met. They're doing a podcast of a show, and I was just saying, like, how I was talking about my intimacy direction, and I was doing a show, blah, blah, blah. And I was saying, a lot of the work that I do when I go into a production, there's a little bit of education that comes, that happens between me and, let's say, the director or the producer who's been around for a while, less so between the young artists and myself. Like, sometimes I teach in educational institutions, and I bring up, I offer this kind of intimacy course. They've already been taught this, so it's a discussion. I'm not teaching anything. We're applying it now. It's about applied concepts of consent, and our understanding of consent, and the width and breadth and depth of consent. And this is all being taught to them, like, in their youth. So now it's a matter of expanding the world. The ideas of decolonizing the rehearsal space, like, this is new for a lot of, like, established artists, they have to kind of reconceptualize what that might mean. For our younger generations, they're having these conversations in theater school. So they're already coming in with their ideas of, like, how to create, living, breathing documents of well-being in a space, and how to, like, it's so promising, Julie. Like, it's just so promising, and really, like you're talking about, like when I first moved to Toronto, I did some in school teaching. Like I would go, like, and I would just do like drama classes, and it's, it was fun. And I remember going into some schools, most schools, and working with grade twos, grade threes, offering, I don't know, various curriculum, arts curriculum kind of stuff, and put them together, do little scenes, and little boys would sometimes pair up to do a scene, or little girls pair up to do a scene, and they're like, this is my husband, this is my wife. And like, just, like just the no question about love, like no question about, like no question about gender and the fluidity of that. In particular in the cities, but I think it's starting to kind of spread out in larger domains of this planet, this conversation with our younger people who are just, demanding conversations on environment and the environmental crisis, on equity and the relief of race and the demand on conversations in equitable environments, the conversations of Black Lives Matter, the conversations of, like, Indigenous space and thievery, colonial thievery, and all, like, these are just banter now, like with a lot of our younger people. And so what kind of art is that going to create? If we're boundary pushers, and if we respond to our immediate environment, and if we're here to stretch and pull and to activate or provoke or to incite, whoa. It was interesting. Recently I had this conversation with this gentleman who was like, talking about, I don't know if it's, cool to bring children into this world. It's just so much anger. There's so much hate. There's so much. I'm like, oh, what? Like, come on. Like, have you met the young people? Like, yeah, there's some shitty. Yeah. We're in this big divisive, like, place, and there's a massive othering that's happening now. And there's a reckoning happening for sure. But it's happening because there is a real demand. It's like this kind of push that happened in the 60s. I feel like we're in this other era. We're in this other swell of, like, ça suffit, like, no more, like, time's up. And that's coming from our young people and our older people, like some of us who are, like, curious and always wanting to, are open to it. But I'm always like, teach me your language again. Like, I'm my God, like, I'm taking so many friggin' courses. I'm having so many conversations, and I'm really trying my best to just, as someone who's, like, white and, like, heteronormative presenting and, like, like just fucking listen and just learn.
It's interesting because when I was very, very young, came out and did all the, like, activisty things because I needed it. I came from a Northern Ontario community where it was not kosher. It just wasn't cool. It wasn't even allowed to a certain extent to be gay and to come out and all that stuff. And I find myself now, as I'm older, really impressed with this, the activism, but also very kind of like, oh, I kind of want the make believe. I want the make believe. I want the storytelling where I don't need to be in today's society, where I can be in. And maybe I think a part of me is holding on to that 80s. You remember in the 80s, that's all it was. It was fantasy stuff, and it was living in pretend. Like, I want to be Peter Pan. A part of me just wants to be Peter Pan, and I want stories that make me feel like Peter Pan. And sometimes I wonder, and you're definitely more in touch with the youth today than I am. Are there there's a subset? I feel like there's a subset of the youth that are expressing this, like you said, this environmental consciousness, the racial consciousness, all that stuff. Is there also a subset of youth that are going the other direction, kind of like into, like, the Peter Pan kind of
I don't know.
imagination, or is that kind of suffering a little bit because we're so preoccupied?
You know, I feel like my perspective it, you know, because I'm so, one of my curiosities in my investigations is how do we exist when we remove binary? Period. One or the other. I think they can all coexist.
Mhm.
And you either step in here, you step in there, you step in there, but they all carry each other, right? Like it's all weaved, and it just depends on where your lens is. So you can still have the magic and be political, but just choose to be magical at the moment. That doesn't mean you're not carrying politic and the other way around. You know, like we're whole. We're whole. And so yeah, I mean, I see people making choices, but I kind of have a hard time with my lens not seeing them without the removal of the binary altogether. And it's just
Right.
right
I
now,
understand.
this is where they're at. Do you know what I mean? So there's
Totally.
no cost. There's no like balance. Like you're focusing too much here or too much there. You know, I mean, uh, I remember, you know, to kind of speak to what you're talking about. I remember seeing this brilliant show. I really wish I could remember the artist. She's from New York, spoken word. It was fucking amazing. It was at Buddy's. It was just really good. It was like life-changingly good. You know, she's magical, and she talked about being you know, someone who was gay and black and like New York, and but coming from Africa and like kind of coming from like this kind of balance of identities, and really was about the celebration of her coming out in New York. And she had a rhythm and a tempo and a power and a strength and a everything. Like all you wanted to do was just get up and just like, I don't know, my feet were not touching the ground. And at one point, someone raised their hand and she was like, yes, because she could comment, we could comment back and forth. And they turned it, they said, I don't know if you noticed, but in the front of the audience, there's a group of people who need a translator because they can't hear you. And you're going in and around the audience, but they can't see you. They have to rely on the translator. And I think that's disrespectful, and I think that's unkind, and I think that, and they ranted on her. And the energy, this elation, this power, this magic, this like transformation went, ooh, like it just crashed and burned. It crashed and burned because suddenly it became about ideology and human rights and the navigation of it, the technical importance of it, and that like just became like a, you know, are you being heart mindful? Are you being like, and there's so much to be said about that. There's so much to be said about that. Like how this person, this young person wants to change something that's not being addressed, you know, and it wants to create an inclusivity for everyone to feel the power, for it's like enough that, you know, you just got like an interpreter and that's enough. How do you modify your art to include and to, you know, all that? Yes. And at the same time, it was going somewhere. How do you allow something to go somewhere? When do we intervene? When do we not? No answers to any of this. No answers to any of this because it's right. It's like the Greeks say, right versus right.
Right. Right.
Yeah. So it's like, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, so what it did was it exploded the room with questions, sadness. She wove her way back. We found our way back. We went back to that place. She went to the front of the audience. You know, it stayed with us. This happened like 4 or 5 years ago. I'll never forget it. Because in the moment I had thoughts like, like, fuck. We were in a place of transcendence. We were in a place of prayer. We were in a place of light. And someone took shadow and went, boom. Was that really the case? I don't know. Someone took education. Someone took the art away for a moment to put a spotlight on what was still creating a little bit of harm. So I was like, okay, maybe we need that. And maybe we need to kind of backtrack a little bit till this balance out. It's intersection. And then we bring back the art. It's intersectionality. We can keep talking about like, oh, why do I have to focus on this group of people? You know, the majority of us are. It's like, because we want love for all. So we have to listen. I know we want magic, but sometimes we need to listen about where the magic is still not happening because it's just not allowed or just hasn't been given a voice.
Well, I think what you said in response to my question is really the thing. It's that you need all of it.
Yeah.
I think that's the thing. It's the global thing is you need all of it. And as a former, 20-something rebel who created the first queer university college clubs in the North and had that rah,
Yeah.
you navigate through life as an artist too, where your art becomes about certain things and then it changes over time. And as long as you also have that space to express that. And I think for me, it's been a whirlwind, and it changes with your life's perspective. Where I'm at the point in my life where I need that Peter Pan, because I'm 40, almost 45 years old, and
Julie, yeah, I remember. I'm going to go back to that thing I said I was going to say. So this one workshop you took of mine.
Yes, I remember that. Yeah.
And it was an intimacy class, I believe. Was that an intimacy
class?
Yes,
it was intimacy. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was near the end, I remember. And the exercise was, here's a little bit of text. And it's pretty sparse text from what I remember. Mm-hmm. And I think the task was connect as raw, as simple, as naked, like no bells and whistles, no, just you and the essence of what you want to offer and say, and touch had to be significant. And it was just sparse. Now, what do you do? Do you remember? I love it. That's why I fell in love with you. I've always loved you, but I fell deeply in love with you this time.
I remember grabbing a net.
Those shopping bag nets.
Yes, because what you omitted here is that you expressly told us you can grab any object in the room.
Oh, I guess I did. Okay, yeah.
And so I looked at my scene partner, because you also, I think, assigned us, or we chose our scene partner. I can't remember, but I looked at the scene partner and I said to her, I said, I'm grabbing something. She's giving us permission to do it. Hell yeah! And I mean, even if you hadn't given us permission, I probably would have grabbed something. But that's just how I am. But yeah, so I grabbed this net thing that I found and I emptied it.
And what'd you do with it? Do you remember what you did with it?
We put on our heads.
On your heads. So here's this like scene that's about like two people connecting, and they have fishnet bags over their heads. And it was one of the most honest things I've ever seen. It was.
Well, and I think yeah, it was fascinating because I was with a very honest partner as well, right? Yeah. It really, I wish, I mean, we have to end this like soon, but essentially I wish we had more time to speak, and maybe we should do this again and speak about intimacy and authenticity, because that is so primordial to the work that you do and the way that I like to approach art. But it really made a huge difference for us to do this scene together, because we had that connection. It was there, that authenticity.
So it didn't matter what you were wearing. It didn't matter what you were doing.
It didn't matter. It could have been a rubber band that we held between our teeth to say the text, like it didn't matter as much the object, but it was definitely like, yeah.
And it's how you weave your art. Like it went from an exercise of intimacy into an experience of beauty. Like you brought art and beauty. You took, like what you did was you took this and you just expanded the world to just include something else that was ephemeral and tangible. But because it was grounded in truth, it became art. And So I thought, you just can't, like, Julie, like, no matter what you do, it's artful.
Well,
Yeah.
you know,
Anyway, I
and
just wanted to
just
remind
yeah,
you.
just thank you. What do you say to that, right? But just to wrap that up is to about make believe is I think that there are some artists who, rather than confront things as they are, confront them through an imaginative state. And perhaps for me, that was an imaginative state. Was okay if I throw the hairnet on this, it'll all make sense in some weird abstract way, you know.
But that's
So
how you
like,
like.
that's just, yeah.
You transcended the boundary. You transcended the binary of like, do I do something serious and simple, or do I add art and beauty? Like, it was just that. It was just that.
It's just that. That's just what it is. Alix Sideris. What can I say other than I wish we had more time because
I
I feel
know.
like we could have explored so many topics. I really do think intimacy and authenticity is something that we have to talk about again at some point. So for everybody who's listening, we did have some technical challenges. There will be some cuts in the audio and video at some point. So I'm greatly sorry about that. So Canadian of me to do it this way. So Alix, is there anywhere that people can learn more about you? Do you have a website, a social media account, somewhere where they can go and look at your work and or contact you and perhaps participate in your meditation
Yeah,
sessions?
a lot of that information is on my website. So that's at Alix, Alix Sideris, S as in Sam, I, D as in David, ERIS as in Sam. So alixsideris.com.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for coming on the show, and I will direct my listeners and viewers now to visit your website and perhaps participate in your wonderful sessions. And if you're in Toronto, guys, and if Alix is offering any courses, go take them, please. They're awesome. So thanks for coming on the show.
What a joy. What a joy. Thanks for having me.
It's been fun.